Mr. Mitchell, we recognize you now for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm David Mitchell. I'm founder of Patients for Affordable Drugs. We're a national organization focused exclusively on policies to lower prescription drug prices. To maintain our independence, we don't accept funding from any organizations that profit from the development and distribution of prescription drugs. We're about patients first, last, and always. More importantly for the committee, I'm a relapsed cancer patient with multiple myeloma. It's an incurable blood disease. Drugs are keeping me alive, and because my cancer finds its way around drugs, I'm going to need new ones. So the importance of innovative, affordable drugs is not theoretical for me. It's literally life and death. I hope to watch my youngest son graduate from high school in 3 years and to have one of my older kids give me a grandchild one day. I'm very grateful for the drugs produced by the science and research sector in our country, but life-saving drugs have to come at prices that will bankrupt patients and ruin the lives of people who are struggling to maintain their health. Yesterday, I sat in an infusion room for almost 5 hours, and I received a 2-drug combination that costs more than $26,000 a month. Prior to this drug regime, I took Revlimid, made by Celgene, for 5.5 years, and I participated in a risk evaluation and mitigation program. I obtained my drugs only from specific specialty pharmacies, and each month I received counseling on the dangers of the drug, and I participated in a survey designed to remind me of those dangers. The counseling consisted of a nurse reading a list of cautions to me. The survey was an automated phone call, press 1 for yes, 2 for no, and the whole process took 5 to 10 minutes. It could easily have been duplicated by any generic manufacturer. It wasn't rocket science. Of course, during the same period, Celgene was doing its best to delay generic versions of the drug by hiding behind its restricted distribution system and REMS, refusing to give samples to generic drug makers. Here's what that meant for me. My out-of-pocket cost for Revlimid went from $42 a month in 2011 to $250 a month by the time I had to stop taking it last year because of side effects. As you can see from this invoice, the retail price for one 4-week cycle of Revlimid is $10,691, more than $500 per capsule. Now, I'm lucky. At the time, I had good employer-provided insurance. I'm on Medicare now. But Medicare beneficiaries aren't always so fortunate. They're paying thousands of dollars out of pocket every year. It is the most expensive out-of-pocket Medicare drug. Members of the committee, that's the impact of REMS abuse for real people, and it's a part of the problem with drug prices in America. Patients are foregoing their medications, they're spending their retirement funds and their kids' college savings when a generic competitor sits right around the corner. In 2016, Revlimid accounted for 62% of Celgene's revenue. Revlimid is key to propping up its stock price. It's clear to me that Celgene is gaming our system, or as the chairman said in his opening remarks, manipulating the regulatory framework. It's using bogus pretext of risk evaluation and mitigation to unlawfully deny samples to generic manufacturers in order to prevent them from developing a cheaper alternative. It's blocking market competition. We need to reform the law and stop these abuses. But speeding generics to market will only address a fraction of the problem of high drug prices. The problem is that instead of a competitive-free market for prescription drugs, we have a system of monopoly pricing by the drug companies through government policy. We have pharmacy benefit manager middlemen who process billions in drugs each year, but who keep all their deals secret. As President Trump has said, and 82% of Americans agree, it's time to allow Medicare to negotiate prices for drugs on an open market instead of allowing drug companies to act as monopolies. I also believe that requiring transparency into PBMs and into prices set when a drug is invented using taxpayer funding would go a long way to making drugs more affordable. And we should set prices based on the value they deliver to patients. I'm extremely encouraged that members on both sides of the aisle are focusing on drug prices. In my experience, the most enduring legislative successes in our country have come with bipartisan action. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you all to the panel for being here today. I will this time recognize myself for 5 minutes. I'd like to start with Mr. Is it Lacher? Is it the long A?
Oh, it's Leisure.
Leisure. Okay,
Thanks
all right. I missed it in two areas then. Mr. Leischer, in 2014, the trade association representing generic manufacturers commissioned a study showing that the annual costs of misuse of restricted distribution systems to delay generic market entry was about $5.4 billion annually. The estimated cost to the federal government was $1.8 billion. In the past few years, has Momenta Pharmaceuticals encountered more difficulty accessing samples, or have they encountered less difficulty? Could you answer that, please?
So we've encountered more difficulty accessing samples because what I think has happened is companies have found that the law is not being enforced that exists today, and that the litigation that's been brought against them for engaging in these activities has been able to delay access.
You, in your testimony, you said that at times when you have tried to purchase samples from wholesalers, they ask you if you are conducting generic or biosimilar studies, and when you respond yes, they tell you their contract prohibits them from selling samples to you. Do you then go to the manufacturer or try to obtain samples? And if so, how do they respond? Would you break that down first?
So, yes, I'd be happy to. So we would go to a wholesaler typically to buy the product. And for many products, we're able to buy the product because this is certain companies that are engaging in these practices. We have chosen to go and develop other products in cases where we haven't been able to purchase from the wholesaler just because we had other options for development available given our size. We don't believe that we believe we would have ended up in protracted negotiations if we had gone to the manufacturer based on our experience with talking to other companies.
Just a couple more questions. Are these expensive products that have been off patent for a while?
These are all products that we design a development program to launch when the patents expire. That's the intent of the biosimilar law in Hatch-Waxman. You access the product near the end of the patent life to do the development, and then you prepare to launch at the time the patents are over. Okay,
well, I think it's pretty clear. Appreciate your articulation. I guess last question would be, how do we fix the problem?
Well, we think the best way to fix the problem is to, and there are proposals in terms of the Fast Generics Act and the CREATES Act on the Senate, is to recognize more explicitly that a condition of an FDA approval is a recognition that products will be sold at commercially reasonable terms to generic and biosimilar companies so that we can fulfill the promise of Hatch-Waxman and the promise of the biosimilar law.
Thank you, Mr. Leischer. At this time, I'm going to yield 5 minutes to Mr. Krishnamurthy. Are we getting closer? I know we're still working on that. So
pretty close.
Okay.
Call me Raja.
I got it.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you again for appearing before the subcommittee and sharing your very personal experience with us. As we heard in your testimony, you've experienced rising prescription drug prices in a deeply personal way through your battle with cancer. You describe your experience with one drug in particular, Revlimid, which is made by the drug company Celgene. Celgene has been accused of improperly using its restricted distribution systems to prevent would-be generic competitors from getting access to samples of Revlimid, which they need to eventually get FDA approval. In fact, the FTC warned in a 2014 amicus brief filed in a lawsuit against Celgene, quote, "If a brand firm can effectively block generic firms from accessing brand product for bioequivalence testing, it may be able to continue to prevent generic competition even after its patents on these products expire." So we're really talking about a time period after the patents expire. The FTC also warned that this practice could, quote, "undermine the core principle of the patent system that patents have a limited duration." Mr. Mitchell, what does the prospect of generic competition mean to you as a patient?
Means lower prices for drugs that will work just as well as the brand name drugs that are being given to me and other patients. sticking with Revlimid, the Kaiser Family Foundation reports that the median out-of-pocket cost for a Medicare Part D beneficiary on Revlimid is $11,500 a year. This is from a company that runs profits in the high 20s and paid its CEO almost $100 million over the last 3 years. So there's room there to lower the price and continue investment in R&D, produce a good return for investors, but lower the cost for patients for a drug that will work equally well.
Well, the interesting thing about what you said is that your out-of-pocket expenses are almost $12,000 a year. Think of what it's costing Medicare to provide these drugs to yourself. I mean, this is why Medicare is going to go bankrupt if we don't get control of these prescription drug prices.
Well, and it's not only Medicare, it's employers,
right,
who are trying to provide good health benefits to their employees. When they're confronted with rising costs like this, it becomes increasingly difficult to provide the benefits that people need at prices that they can afford.
Absolutely.